everybody, what's up? It's Newbie back again with yet another video, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the shows that I watched back in March of 2025. This is not necessarily going to be strictly in order, but this is basically going to lump the various shows I watched multiple episodes of together so I can basically talk about what I thought of the various shows that I watched during the month of March. I saw The Chosen Season 4, Episodes 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. In this stretch of episodes, we've got, spoiler alert, major character death, and I think that was followed up pretty well in later episodes. Seeing some things actually change for Quintus, who's a side character who kind of has a bit of a spotlight on him, was also kind of nice. You know, I'm sort of numb by so many shows that are afraid to change the status quo, kind of looking at you, 911, and we'll get to that later. But it's nice to see them actually commit to having character changes and a character arc for the character of Quintus. I also thought it was nice to see Jesus finally hinting to others that he is going to die, as if you actually read the Bible passages leading up to these events, he's already been speaking about this for a while now. It's just that not everyone entirely understands, and it sort of is an interesting dynamic between Jesus and his disciples. It also was kind of cool to see Jesus give some admonishments to those around him, emphasizing the value of serving. For example, when in The Chosen, we sort of see them afraid to portray Jesus as giving commandments. Like, at least from what I hear, they've completely omitted the famous line that he told the woman caught in adultery, which was, "Go and sin no more." So I appreciate that at least they included him saying, "Oh, go serve," in this series. A little bit disappointed by the amount of things that Jesus said that they did leave out of this series, but I do think for the things that they chose to include, they included them pretty accurately. And also I think that for the things that they added into the show that Jesus did not do or Jesus did not say, they've done so tastefully in a way that didn't come off as blasphemous, at least to me. I watched The Penguin, Season 1, Episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I think that this was a great show. I thought it would be pretty predictable in the first half, because in the first half, we get the main character kind of getting himself into a very similar type of jam and then getting himself out of it in a very similar way. So I thought it'd be kind of predictable and boring, but around the midpoint, they really change up how they do the storytelling without giving away too many spoilers. In a couple episodes, they dive into some characters in a way that I didn't really expect, and then moving forward, they really drive the story forward. There's a bit of actual momentum, and the story actually starts going somewhere in a way that I didn't really feel like was happening in the first half of the season, and so I think it sort of recovered from that predictability. Not to say that those earlier episodes weren't good. I think that some of those episodes were like 9 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s, but at the same time, it just sort of felt like we'd be getting the same thing over and over again. I was starting to get worried, but that ended up not being the case, so I'm very happy about that. I saw Homicide: Life on the Street, Season 4, Episodes 9, 17, 10, 12, and 11, kind of out of order. The order that they're up on streaming is not entirely the order that you'll find if you look it up online, so kind of confusing the way that they make you bounce around here and there. I'm not even sure if I'm citing the episode numbers correctly, but the episodes that I saw were the Sniper episode, the Full Moon episode, the Forgotten Country, and the Hat. Sniper episode is pretty cool. One thing that's kind of nice about Homicide is that you don't always get a satisfying conclusion to everything that happens. It keeps things pretty unpredictable and it kind of keeps you on your toes. I do enjoy that about this series, as well as its darker, less polished nature. I think that the Sniper episode exhibited that perfectly. Full Moon is a bit of a weird episode. It's not like one of the normal episodes of Homicide. It pushed the boundaries of nudity on broadcast for sure, which, you know, this series certainly loves to do, loves pushing boundaries, but it also served as a great character study for the main characters, which I thought was kind of neat. Every single episode, they do try to add dashes of that. You can't really watch an episode of Homicide without getting a pretty good understanding of at least a little bit of at least one of the characters, but Full Moon really did that as its focus. They didn't just do a character study of the main characters, they also did a character study of the side characters that the main characters were investigating, which also was pretty cool. Forgotten Country was a fun little crossover episode between Homicide: Life on the Street and Law and Order. I'd never seen Law and Order, so I didn't really know the Law and Order characters that were in this, but I do think that this episode worked really well on its own, and those Law and Order characters really didn't feel out of place in this episode. And of course, as usual, Munch's miseries, they make for some great comedy. The The Hat was a really funny episode, even though it was kind of dark. You know, the mystery wasn't necessarily great, but forcing two men to deal with a female suspect alone made for some really uniquely awkward moments that this show really leaned into in a way that I think a modern show wouldn't have, without spoiling too much. Now, also was one of the few episodes I've seen so far in this series that didn't open with a murder or the discovery of a body, which also sort of helped make that episode stick in my mind. I watched Everybody Hates Chris, season 1, episode 12. I don't really like this show. The only reason I watched it was because my siblings had it on. They wanted me to do something with them. Here's what I'll say about Everybody Hates Chris. You know, the bones of the show aren't terrible, and if you looked at the show on paper, so much of it should work. You know, you've got a lot of cutaway gags that sort of feel like Family Guy, you know, if you're familiar with Family Guy. A lot of the show also focuses on the struggles of people who are living in a lower socioeconomic substrata, I suppose. When you have characters who are in uncomfortable situations, that naturally lends itself to more comedy, at least in my opinion. The thing I really don't like about the show is actually the fact that Chris Rock's voice is just embedded within the very soul of this series. Because every time I'm watching the show, we've got Chris Rock shouting in my ear, and it just feels very annoying. Part of it's like, calm down, dude, but part of it's just like, I just don't like his voice, especially when he's shouting. Why is he shouting in like the most calm of moments, even when things that are happening are not particularly funny? Like, even the most normal moments, Chris Rock is always screaming in my ear. It just grates on me, even though the episode is only 30 minutes long. It's just very, very annoying. That's just me. My younger siblings seem to love the show. Yeah, it makes sense, because it does sort of feel like it's designed for children, because as he's shouting, he's also telling you exactly how he feels, which sort of just feels repetitive if you kind of are watching the scenes and you're getting the gist of how he feels. Like, you know, you see a scene of Chris Rock clutching his stomach as it rumbles, and then he says, "And now I'm hungry." Like, it just feels like a lot to me. I watched 911 season 8 episode 9. I sort of watched this out of order. I'm watching the 911 franchise with one of my siblings, but one of my siblings was home on a break for school, and she was like, "Hey, I want to watch an episode of 911." So I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll just watch an episode of 911 and I'll rewatch it with that sibling." So I watched season 8 episode 9. I thought the Buck stuff in this episode was really working, although I think that I wish that the episode really made him come to terms with how he treated Eddie in this episode, because he didn't treat Eddie in this episode particularly well. I don't think he treated his own behavior towards Eddie in the ways that a true friend would, where normally a friend would say, "I'm sorry." Buck basically said, "I'm not going to do this again," more or less, and Eddie believed him, which I think was just a little bit too easy for my taste. I didn't really love that. Also, Maddie does some really strange things in this episode, not to give away any spoilers, but it's like, these are the types of things that, especially as a first responder or as a dispatcher, you would think that Maddie would end up going to jail for this. Now, in the end, they sort of give her an out as to why she's not in jail, at least in this episode, but still, it's just very strange. And the way that people treated her, like what she did was okay or fine or even a positive thing, kind of befuddled me. But I'm not entirely surprised, because that's kind of how this show rolls. They don't really like to portray the main characters in a negative light, even when they're doing bad things, but still just left me scratching my head. Like, why would you even have her do this? She didn't need to do this. I don't know why they had her take the course of action that she took. And I'm also really curious to see how in the future episodes they deal with the ramifications of what it is that she had done. For Dr. Odyssey, I saw season 1 episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And honestly, I'm thinking about making a whole video about this season in particular. The biggest reason why is because as I've watched the season, it started to come off to me as literal left-wing propaganda. And I'm not being in a hyperbolic sense. I'm not even saying that the show is left-wing and that makes it left-wing propaganda, because I've seen plenty of left-wing shows and I would not call them propaganda. But the thing about the structure of these episodes in Dr. Odyssey is that in many cases, the episode will begin, we have the opening scene, but then we have two characters who sort of huddle up in a corner somewhere, always by themselves, always just the two of them, and they decide to talk about how virtuous they are for having a progressive worldview, whether it's dealing with LGBT family members or abortion, all of these various topics that they discuss. They sort of huddle in a circle and pat themselves in the back for how progressive they are and how that makes them such great people, which I don't really love. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It feels like it's talking down to me as a viewer. But also, it's just strange and unrealistic. Like, in what world are you going to have characters just so openly talking about politics, never with any sort of pushback? It just seems a bit odd and strange to me that they chose to go this route. Usually with people who make shows, like, this was created by Ryan Murphy. He has certainly done his share of putting in progressive leanings and left-wing leanings into his programs, but he didn't really put it in so forcefully like this, unless you count the 911 Lone Star premiere, which I abhor for that same reason. Now, getting away from all that, because I'm sure I could go more in depth in a separate video, I kind of enjoy this show. This show is not necessarily great television, but it also is fun and light and adds some much needed levity to my media diet. If you looked at the list of all the shows that I've watched here, most of them are not necessarily fun and lighthearted. I suppose you could call The Chosen fun, but I mean, a lot of it's just basically leading up to Jesus' death, which is not a fun thing, no matter what the positive ramifications of that ended up being. So to watch Dr. Odyssey, which is a fun, lighthearted show, it kind of almost feels like a soap opera almost, with how the character dynamics of the three main characters are going. It was nice. It was nice. And it was good to have a break from the other shows that I've been watching. I also watched Daredevil Born Again season 1, episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The first episode of this show was great. It was incredible. The rest of the episodes that I saw here were mostly fine. Episodes 2 and 3 were kind of cool because we see Fisk settling into his role as the mayor of New York City, and we see Matt doing his normal lawyer stuff, which happens to intersect with the vigilante world, and that kind of feels like the type of thing that would happen in the original series. And I also enjoyed the task force side plot. But there are a lot of things in this season that just didn't really work that well for me, such as the bank robbery episode. But I will say that all the moments that didn't really work well for me weren't necessarily bad, and the things that were like the worst parts of the season, they just weren't that memorable. They were just kind of mid, and they sort of fade into the back of my memory, and the things that stand out to me were the things that I really liked about it. We've got the power plays between Vanessa and Mr. Fisk, you know, working themselves out in some very unique ways that they didn't in the original series, but I think actually enhance and elevate the storytelling in Daredevil Born Again. So I enjoy the episodes that I saw for the most part. Some episodes were kind of meh, but it just sort of felt like, you know, we've got great episodes and good episodes, not a show that's really dipping in quality dramatically. I also saw Blue Bloods season 2 episode 21. I thought this was good and fun and passable. It's not every day that I see a cop show or an episode of copaganda, as the left-wingers would call it. That's about cage fighting bankers. So I guess that was kind of a neat twist. I do think that dealing with, oh, we've got this guy who is a private eye, we have to go to him and we have to figure out how to get this person to give us the information that we need. I also thought that was kind of a nice angle as well. Blue Bloods is a nice show. I don't really have too many notes about this particular episode. I am looking forward to talking about Blue Bloods in the future as I watch more episodes with this. This is one of the shows that I watch with my family. Another show that I watched with my family is Hawaii 5-0. The episode that I saw in the month of March was season 2, episode 9, and I don't like this show, and I do not want to talk about it. Maybe if I see more episodes, I'll talk about it in depth, but I just did not like this episode. And that's all the TV shows that I saw in March of 2025. What did you guys watch in March of 2025? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say. And yeah, that's all I got for this video. So I'll see you guys in another video if you want to see another one of my videos.